All right, and we are live. Welcome back to the Community Agriculture Project podcast. If you're new here, the Community Agriculture Project is an accessible and interactive resource directory to connect people with their local agriculture-related resources. We document and provide insight into local agriculture landscapes and sovereignty-based projects. So, I'm sitting here in Jefferson, New York with the very special people of the Groovy Veggie Farm. Now, when I met them, they were not yet the Groovy Veggie Farm. They were a part of, another operation. And you may recognize them if you were an early listener to our interviews as Christine and Adam. So, today's episode is going to serve as a little bit of an update of where Christine and Adam are at in their journey, what's been going on with the Groovy Veggie Farm, where they've come from and where they've been and where they are now, and what they're up to, really. So, we're going to get into it. I'm going to start with you, Adam. I want you to just, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself if they haven't heard of you before. Introduce yourself and what you do, what you're passionate about, and then we'll go from there.
Cool. I am a adventurer at spirit and a steward of this land, as well as a connector and teacher for all people, to be able to bridge the gap between the earth and what we seem to be doing on this planet at the very moment. And here we are, farming away in Jefferson, New York.
Okay, Christine. A little bit of an introduction. Update the people on what's going on with you.
Sure.
And what you do and what you're passionate about.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me first. I'm really excited to be here and connect with you again. So this year I am basically Groovy HQ. That's kind of my role switch up this year. We started our farm in Washington in the Methow Valley over there, and it was just Adam and I. And then now we moved over to Jefferson, New York, and I'm shifting my focus a little bit out of the field and more into learning how to really run a business, the back end of things and the logistics, and making connections to local organizations and markets, and how I can get more involved into the community and get our food into the hands of more people. So that is more of my role this year. And aside from that, some things that I'm really passionate about, I've been thinking a lot about food access. That is something that I want to dive into, as well as herbal medicine. That's been a practice of mine for a few years, and it's just an evolving relationship that it deepens every year. So that's two of my big focuses. And
And so, can you guys just tell everybody, Groovy Veggie Farm, what was the inspiration behind the start of that? And, what is the mission of Groovy Veggie Farm? What is the foundation of Groovy Veggie Farm? It doesn't have to be earth-shattering. Sometimes things just are, but,
When you form so many connections and opinions about what you're doing, you gain experience through working, and through working you gain all these opinions and how you'd like to see things done. And sometimes when you have such a mind that runs off with ideas, you want to put them all together, and it's hard to fully allow yourself to feel free and working underneath someone else's dream when your dream seems almost more important and bigger, which it is, because it's your individual mission. So everyone's individual dream is the most important thing in their life. So we wanted to show that you can be young, you can be sentient, you can farm, you can do anything you want. And something we're really working towards is quality of life, trying to show people we can have a farm, you can feed the community, you can be bound and rooted in your land, and at the same time go on a month-long trip to another place in the country, or take all these adventures to other farms and connect with all these other communities and learn and do other things aside from just farming, but to,
Yeah, because I met y'all, we met out in Oregon at Rainshadow Organics, which is a lovely farm. They're pretty badass there. They do a lot of incredible things. Mm-hmm. And yeah, like the program that you guys were in when I met y'all was Rogue Farm Corps, which is like specifically trying to get younger people into farming. And you know, they from what I know about the program, they give you a certain impression of like farming. They kind of show you the ropes on a bunch of different things, and you're kind of in this program, but then afterwards it's kind of up to you.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is like the next part of your story. Like, not to say that your story started in Oregon. You have such a vast story before that. But then you went from Oregon up to Washington and Methow and continued there.
Right.
So I guess, can you each tell me one really, really significant thing that you learned in Oregon and kept with you, and then one thing that you learned and kept with you in Washington, and kind of how that's coming into fruition here now that you're in New York, which is both of your home states, by the way.
Right.
So it's kind of like a full circle thing. So I want to tie in like some of those lessons and some of those like through lines. What's your perspective, Adam?
Heavens, yeah. Well, something that I've learned is like we all want to grab onto some sort of schedule, some sort of train, right? You want to know what you're doing. It makes sense. And in farming, it can be so incredibly overwhelming. You know, it could be like a video game where you have like 1,000 different characters to choose from, or it could be like the stock markets where like there's 1,000 different stocks to choose from. And we want to like know what one to do and what's best and what's the best practice, what's the most we can do, how can we get the best veggies, the best money, all of it. And what I've learned is like we've created these dogmas and these structures and walls around the freedom and creativity, the ebb and the flow of the nature of all of these professions, no matter how tied into business, or how tied into nonprofit or not making money or whatever, you know, nomading. But like, what I've learned is that when anyone tells me something about, like a fact about the land, about like what I can and can't do with the soil or with plants, it's a lie. Like you can do it. And I feel like a lot of those older farmers that have told me things, like I've defied a lot of those rules that they say will create plant disease, that they say will reduce your yields, that, you know, and I'm not saying that to be like stubborn and say I told you so, like I can do it, I can prove you wrong, but like every land is so different and so unique that like you know, it's like you can't measure. The microbiology is so expansive. If every grain of soil is different, has a different composition, then everybody's land, every inch of every bed of mine is different. And so like how can someone define and make a fact about how close I can plant something, or when I can plant something, or how much it's going to give me, or how hungry it is, you know? Because I think no plants actually, like, there's few plants that are actually really take from the soil. I think most of them exchange. So we're here like experimenting, trying to figure out what extra, like figuring out what boundaries we can push on this land. So I don't soil test, because I want to see, like, the plants are growing fine. So why is there anything? There's nothing wrong. You know, we have to analyze everything. How can I add a specific amount of these microbes and nutrients and like know that they're gonna stay? You know, who's to say that like sloshing compost tea aggressively isn't gonna do something? Although, you know, it's like we've been proven wrong by nature day in and day out. So we just got to keep working with our environment, and that's why I think as a farmer it's really important to try and get rooted in your land so you can really observe how it reacts each time. That's kind of really exciting thing about here is it's a really experiment and see exactly.
This is Groovy Veggie.
Yeah, we're upgrading here. You know, I have the luxury of layering. In the desert, you don't have as much material to layer, so you really do focus on trying to like inoculate things and add create like host environments. And out here, like this, just being here is the host environment. You know, the water. Like, what's really interesting is people are all over. There's droughts along the whole country, around the whole country, and you know, a drought in each place just means a lack of the normal amount of water. So New York, although there's like considered to be a drought, that's still 40 more inches than the desert's getting out in eastern Washington or in central Oregon. So our soil has to be able to handle that better. You know, it has to be able to handle a dry year better because it just has more.
I think one of the coolest takeaways I had from Oregon is just having the experience of a full diet organic farm, and so full diet organic means you grow and raise everything the human body needs all year long. So essentially this farm could be cut off from the rest of the world and you would be fine, you would be healthy, you'd be eating, you'd be good. Vegetables, meat, grain, dairy, mill our own flour, make our own products, canned goods, things like that. So just through the program in general, we got exposed to a lot of different areas in farming, and seeing that you really can grow and raise and provide and barter for everything that you need to eat was extremely inspiring, and it just opened up a whole world of opportunities in my mind. And what was cool about that is that after you're exposed to everything, you can distill it down to what you really want and what you really want to focus on and what inspires you the most and what just like makes you wake up in the morning. So that was really awesome about Oregon. And then in Washington, I have never felt such a deep sense of community support before, where it's this little secluded valley up in the mountains, and it's kind of like Happy Valley up there. Like it's gorgeous. It's beautiful, and it's a really special place. And the community just has a really strong focus on supporting local people, supporting young farmers, supporting artists, supporting makers, things like that. And so I just think we got an overwhelming amount of support just year one. And year one, I felt like we were wildly successful. And we couldn't have done that without that support of people just taking the new guys in and week after week buying from us and supporting us and joining our CSA and telling people. And so community involvement, community support, and being involved and having a reciprocal relationship with your community, I think was the most important takeaway for me in Washington.
And now that you're here, you take both of those things with you.
Right.
And that is contributing to your dream of seeing, comparatively, Oregon and Washington, especially the region that y'all were at, was much less densely populated than the region that we're in now. And just, with a lot of major cities close to here and everything, I can see how food access could become something that's even more on the forefront. Right. Even though, of course, there's food access and resource access for all the people that live out in the desert and, the indigenous people that are out on reservations and otherwise. And food access is always an issue. But, yeah, how have those things tied into what you're really pushing for now? And it could be something, it might be something that's still in the works.
Right.
I know that's a part of it. But.
Totally. Yeah, so kind of bringing those lessons here. So having the full diet experience, that's definitely a vision that we want for our farm someday, and that's something that we're building towards. And when it comes to community, that's something that I'm trying to build here as well. And let me reverse a little bit.
Because it takes a little bit of time to tap in with your community in a new place.
Right, totally.
Like, y'all, what month is it? It is August right now.
It's August, yeah.
And you guys got to Jefferson
at the end of May.
I've been here for 2 months.
Yeah.
That's quite a short amount of time. And
right.
Like, just in the year that you were farming in Methow, like, to have that much success, I was really observing it from a distance, just seeing, like, okay, you're creating quite an abundance, you know, with not only the quantity but the quality of the products that you're producing. You know, like,
right.
I know because of the time that I spent at Rainshadow, like, the standards were super high. What was created was, like, pretty awesome. And that was, like, instilled in y'all, I feel like. So you brought that to your next spot.
Right, for sure.
And so, yeah, and I would say that, like, even in the very short amount of time that you've been here, it seems like a lot has happened, which I feel like we're going to talk more with Adam about as far as the goats and everything. But also, there's something to be said as far as community goes, where it's like going back to that full circle idea of, like, you're back in New York. Like, part of your community is people that have been in your life before.
Right.
So can you speak a little bit on that?
Yeah, definitely. That is that was one of the main driving forces back to New York, actually, is like, this is where our roots are. This is where we have a lot of friends and connection and family and just people we love. And I just have a lot of love for New York in general, and I would love to make an impact on communities here. And I definitely see a need for just better food access, better food quality, just getting better food to the people, because I think that there's, like, a consciousness, a food consciousness that exists west of the Mississippi that doesn't necessarily exist out here. And it's building, but I feel like we're still catching up to it. There's still a lot of work to do, and you can find pockets of it, but I would just love to be one of the farms kind of leading the charge on that someday, hopefully. And yeah, it's really special. It feels good to be back. It's kind of surreal. So yeah, so you guys were talking about that a little bit yesterday, just like in one of your experience with the goats and the goat feed, and like how that was able to tell you a little bit about the community that you're in and like the access of resources around here, because it's like something that's in your guys' nature. What I observe is, like, yeah, you're community oriented and resourceful, so you're gonna be, like, looking out around you for these things that you can incorporate to kind of alchemize into your farm and into your offerings. So, you know, part of getting to know your community is also getting acquainted here in the new spot with the goats. So, like, do either of you want to speak on that?
Yeah. Well, something aside from community is establishing your own land and your own space before you can welcome the community. So, like, the goats and the farm isn't what's bringing in necessarily people, but it's like our individual outreach to other places. And what's interesting about this area is that the farms are kind of more spread out, and they're not as youthful, and they don't quite grow the same things that we grow. Everybody's quite, you know, very, very different area. And as a farmer trying to create my land to host people and to feed people, I haven't been able to take a moment to leave, you know, to really even to do much other than a few events or a few, you know, the markets where you're meeting people. But something interesting with the goats and the mentality around locality is, so the current situation of this area is that people believe more in local than how it's grown. So as long as it's grown nearby, that's all that matters. But what we learn is a lot of the things grown nearby aren't very good for us. They're sprayed or they're GMO crops, and they have proven many bad things. But besides all that, people don't really quite grasp the fact of organic, also because the generation is older here, and so they kind of believe that if you just don't spray no pesticides, that's all that matters, which is a very, very strong point. As long as there are no pesticides or sprays or chemicals in the ground that they're putting down, that's like a huge step forward. But what we need to now get the local community and audience to grasp is that cleanliness of food. And this is also a very sparse area. There's not many resources. Like, the stores don't have what you need. Almost nobody does. So we have to ship a lot of our things in. Goat grain goat dairy pellets are, they come off a chewy, but they're organic. And the shipping, as one small business, I don't find that to be quite a footprint as compared to all the, carbon footprint of the larger industries and what goes into all the corn and soy that is produced to feed these livestock, because what's around here is corn and soy. And
so I guess I want to use this as a transition point to tell the listeners like a little bit about the goats and the sheep that are here, what your vision is with them, and why it matters what they're fed.
Yeah. So I guess the best way to describe it is to tell you the story of our goat, Snowflake. So when we got Snowflake, we got her, she's a La Mancha dairy goat. She's white, she's beautiful. And she gives us when we got her, she gave us a quart of milk a day. And she didn't have much of a coat. It was all just like white and, no hair in front of her horns. And she was fed a diet of saltines and cracked corn. And her baby calf her kid was still drinking milk 6 months. 6 months in, which usually they're weaned off after 2.5, 3 months. So there was some mismanagement of practice, but we really wanted to get going on a dairy goat, so we picked her up. She was still healthy. She checked out. So we brought her back, and on the way back, we gave her some of what she used to eat. Like, they tried feeding her the saltines that the other farm gave her and cracked corn, and she didn't touch a single bit of it. She just went right for the hay. And then we, since they're sensitive animals, their digestive systems are sensitive, you need to introduce new foods slowly. So we started to add the brush, the trees, the grass. We started adding a little more fibrous matter, like some ferns, some dead plant matter. And all of a sudden you start noticing like her coat's coming back a little bit.
That's literally such an abundance compared to cracked corn and saltines. Like,
right.
All of that variety of food compared to a saltine.
Saltine.
That's crazy.
And where she came from, she was in a pen where all the goats were stepping in mud because there's so many that the ground can't regenerate and they're not on a pasture. So we have Snowflake free ranging. And what I mean by free ranging, I don't mean she's in a fence. I mean she's literally, I let her out and she goes out and does her thing for the whole day.
And can you describe like the area that the animals like go about? You know what I mean? Like that they graze on?
Yeah, so
like what right type of plants are there? Like what is the land used for?
Yes, the land is just, it's just what it's used for. It's just been kind of taken over by the forest. So it's mostly forest, lots of trees and low-hanging branches. We have a lot of, and as far as the pasture goes, of the clear spaces, we have a lot of clover, vetch, yarrow, multiple different types of grasses. That's all that I'm really able to discern off my, lots of flowers. I'm sure
already having pasture and forest is like, that's two totally different climates and environments and ecosystems for them to be able to graze in. Yeah.
Now, what's interesting about a pasture that hasn't been touched in a long time is, yes, it's rested, but it hasn't been excited to grow like larger and more voracious. So when you introduce the animals, you're fertilizing that land. So it might be nice, like, and diverse and grassy, But once they eat it down and then they poop and pee and eat the minerals and just do their sheep things, shed even their wool, which helps bring mycorrhizae connections to the soil. They're ingesting so much better, diversity in the pasture, and after a bit, all that fertility brings back a stronger pasture, more. So then in the next years, you can maybe assume that you can add another animal to the mix. More importantly,
it's truly regenerative.
It creates like the quality in which you're ingesting, right? Like what do you want to put in your body? So when I drink the milk from Snowflake, I'm drinking the milk from the birch and the beech and the maples and the grasses, right? I'm not drinking milk from like hay that's been cultivated. It's wild. It's inoculated with the wild microbes. So, over time she went from that 1 quart of milk to she's giving us 3/4 of a gallon a day.
And that was over how many weeks?
Over a course of 4 to 6 weeks.
Wow.
And we switched her pellet regimen to be organic, and we reduced it in quantity, and she's, oh my god, she's so happy. She follows us around kind of like a dog. She mows my fields.
She's happy, and her milk tastes so good. It's the best milk that I've ever tasted, I think, in my life.
Thank you.
From an animal. Really?
Yeah, it's the best milk I think I've tasted too.
Yeah. And it's like when you're ingesting products from these animals, it's like, what do you want to be ingesting? Like cracked corn and saltines? Or do you want like wild forage, organic hay, like really good quality pellets? And even the pellets that we get are very diverse. Like if you want to go into the ingredients of some of them, like even just including like, pea and alfalfa and just a diverse amount of ingredients.
And there's even some kelp in there.
Yeah.
Nice.
Right. So yeah, food is everything. It goes through the animals and straight into our bodies. So
and that affects our moods and the animals' moods. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people traditionally put their animals in a stanchion to milk them, and we've learned over the years that milking actually isn't supposed to be such like a rigid experience, but more like a calm, pleasurable experience. Mm-hmm. So over the past few weeks, we train her to field milk. So I just go up to her, I give her some of those pellets, I give her some fresh branches, and then, I give her love and I pet her and I tell her and I thank her and I milk her right there. She needs no halter, no anything, no restraint. She lets me. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to keep working with that, expanding our herd, producing more yogurt, producing specialty goat ice cream, some goat cheeses.
And soap.
Goat soaps. Can't forget the goat soap. And then over time, like where they are now, we're going to move their permanent little home down and then cultivate that area as a garden. So we're going to keep rotating them throughout the years, while the sheep are rotating every 2 days on an electric fence.
So it sounds like you have a lot of different layers of rotation in your whole operation. That's one thing that I want to talk about. And also just, it sounds like you're really cultivating, like, not yourselves as farmers that are, running the ship necessarily, but like you are really part of this system. And like you're honoring that you're part of the system, like your mood and the mood of the animals and the abundance that comes out of the garden. Like all these things are related, and it needs that reciprocity, right, I guess, to
right,
be able to function in that way.
Right.
But yeah, I really appreciate that about what you guys do. And also, like, yeah, can you just speak a little bit about the different, like, timelines, I guess, that you think about as a farmer and the different rotations that go into that? Like, for example, when we were out in the garden this morning harvesting the most delicious and the most beautiful beans. And what's the type of bean called again?
The provider bush bean.
The provider bush bean.
And it does provide.
It indeed provides. The flowers are delicious. The beans are delicious. But you're talking about, like, for example, like you had planted other things around that you're going to rotate out. like you mentioned that, oh, you had this soy kind of like to attract a certain pest, and you have like these other, you know, leguminous plants that are going to be putting nitrogen in the soil. And so you have rotation that's just like on that level, and then you're thinking about like years and like the long term on this land. And so if you could speak on that a little bit, and also any of the other rotations that I might be missing out on that are relevant.
Yeah. So a few different types of rotations that we do on the farm. So we do crop rotation by bed. So every time we harvest a bed completely, we'll put a different crop into there. And we also do intercropping, so we'll do certain partner plants that help benefit each other as well as the soil. So that's one type of rotation we do. We also rotate our garden with cover crops. So a certain section will be in for this season, and then we will rest it and put in a cover crop, and it'll rest the next season. And then another rotation we do is our a few days a week, a couple days a week, we rotate our sheep to a different part of the pasture to mow down and do their thing, and then we rotate the goats every year and move their enclosure to another section, and their old one becomes the new section of the garden. So those are just like some of the main rotations that we do on the farm.
We're going to be incorporating chickens amongst the sheep and the goats as well, because chickens will eat all the parasites and all the insects that can cause disease within the sheep or even within your soil. We're going to use all the animals to rotate to like kind of change landscape, like terracing the hill to create a wind block or another pollinator patch. Some rotations that we consider is, you know, what's interesting about rotation too is we do rotate because to change the biology, to keep the nutrients, changing nutrients that flow into the soil, to change what's giving and taking. But when you add microbes, you amend with compost and carbon matter. So we like to try and layer our beds a little bit with what we have and when we can. It buys you a little bit of leeway with replanting of the same species. So you can replant a brassica in the row the second time in a row, assuming that you're going to be feeding it some sort of microbe like LAB, or which is a lactobacillus, which will help like fight fungi. You know, helping compete with disease out here because we're in a wetter environment.
That's definitely, yeah, that definitely sounds like it's been a factor, just adjusting some of your practices to being in a completely different environment. And I mean, it sounds like you're adjusting pretty quick, honestly. And when you were talking about that, it made me think about the hugelkultur.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that? I know that that's something that you and Derek work together on, and I've talked to some other farmers about, you know, this approach too. So I guess just talking about how, first of all, giving the listeners a little bit of like, what is hugelkultur, short definition, and then how are you creating a hyper-local approach to it here?
Yeah. I think we're actually really blessed to be able to do it here. So hugelkultur, in short, is, you can imagine in nature when trees fall and they break down and the soil keeps packing on top over the time, like those buried roots, those buried trees, all that layering occurs and it creates a very organic sponge, which is why like when you walk through a forest, it's like, you know, some forests are like real spongy. So hugelkultur is the human cultivation of taking logs that are partially broken down, or, you know, you can use any logs really, but it's, you know, the best are ones that have been inoculated in the forest already.
Logs or organic matter.
Yeah,
people
organic
use matter,
but technically, I guess, or who knows, technically means, there's nothing technical. But hugelkultur is burying logs underground and then layering whatever else you have. So traditionally, like at the very raw level, burying sticks and putting dirt on top.
Yeah.
And in a little more complex level, you're burying sticks like big sticks, then smaller sticks, then straw, then compost, and then you're putting the topsoil back on. So what we're doing on this farm with our resource access and with our ideas, we have the grace of a mini excavator to dig a 2-foot trench down, 100 foot long, 2 feet deep. And over the past couple months, we've been collecting logs from the forest around us. So I'm on 100 acres, mostly forested. And so we take the Kubota and a trailer out and we go around searching for logs, and we walk into the forest and we just find these beautiful logs full of like moss, mycelium, mushrooms are growing on them, turkey tails are growing on them. You got lichen growing on. They're wet. They're like you grab it and it's breaking down in your hand, and then some are like really hard as rock, and you're like, whoa. And it's like, wow, I hope this thing breaks down.
The fungi will do it.
Yeah, oh yeah,
I believe.
And it's incredible. You know, in this style of farming, Korean natural farming, they believe you know, that there's a method where you put a box of rice out in a forest, and it collects the wild yeasts and microbes, and then you inoculate that into your compost pile. But what's to say that my compost pile right next to the forest isn't already an IMO aversion? What's to say that the sticks that have been rained on, piled, layered on, inoculated, competed over, re-inoculated are not like a version of indigenous like they're all indigenous. IMO means indigenous microorganisms. So it's like everything out in the forest that's there is an indigenous microorganism. So you collect that, you attract it, you bring that into your field, and you're playing right into the biology of your location.
Which then is fed right into your own biology.
Yes.
Yeah. So we like to at Groovy Veggie have this concept that the land, we grow for the land, and so the land grows for us. Mm-hmm. So we like to have as much of a physical interaction with everything we do as we can. So when we plant, we put beans in our mouth, and we let the enzymes from our mouth like help crack the shells and let like our happy giggly energy like inoculate the bean with excitement, love to grow. And then it grows, and it's like, oh hey, I remember you. You know, plants are sentient, so they see us, they're like, hey, you planted me.
They were definitely speaking to us this morning when we were going in for that abundant harvest. I mean, I could feel it. And I feel like that's really the joy of like just documenting projects like what you two work on, is like just trying to communicate with people that when people say like, oh, there was love that went into growing that, or like that was grown with like a lot of care and attention, like that really translates not only on energetic levels but like microbial levels.
Right.
And just like it there is a direct translation to how it affects us. Mm-hmm. And I love to see it, and it actually matters, you know. Right. So
and when you look at our ancestral practices, there's song with planting, there's song with harvesting, there's song with everything that's done, and there's a good reason for that. And then we get into the business of farming, and the song disappears.
Yeah.
And that's why we gotta like not that's what we're trying to like, not for us, like we're really trying to keep that alive.
Yeah, actually. And like that's very important, because yeah, we in the US we are navigating a lot of like late stage capitalism. Mm-hmm. And I think that being in community and having, you know, these visions for how we would like to live and these practices for how we would like to live is really important, and just like helping us maintain our dreams and stay connected to our dreams, even though we're in a system that can be really frustrating. Mm-hmm. You know? So yeah, thank you for sharing an update to your story and inspiring people in that way. Like, you guys inspire me and a lot of other people and everyone that you come in contact with, so it means the world.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And yeah, like there's a lot of exciting things on the horizon with the Groovy Veggie Farm. And we hardly even got to mention Christine's practice with her skincare. And there's just a lot of excitement. So I'm just here to let you know, stay tapped in with them and their work. And if people want to connect with or support you, where can they find you and how can they do that?
We have Instagram, Groovy Veggie, at Groovy Veggie Farm. And I also, for my skincare line, I also have Embodied Earth Botanicals is that. We also have a website, groovyveggiefarm.com, and you can always shoot us an email at groovyveggie@gmail.com.
And if people are in the area, which farmers market do you guys go to or plan to go to that they can catch you at?
Currently, we are at the Bovina Farmers Market, the Hobart Farmers Market, the Stanford Farmers Market, and we are looking to get into a few coming soon, hopefully. So those announcements will be online. They'll be online, I'm sure. Okay, thank you guys. Thank you.
That's it for today, and that's a wrap. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Community Agriculture Project podcast. We are excited to continue bringing you more educational content and more ways to connect with your local resources. So, tune in again next time and be well. Peace.